All right, so picking up from the Griz. Yeah, so he says this. He says from Aval. Okay, so again, just to get back in, so we're all on the same page, so no one can ask me that I'm missing a fact. Okay, he says Aval, Ayol Ha'am. Okay, Ashehu Ha'ayol Shel Musafin. So the Ayol Ha'am, even though it is a Musaf, Aval. Thank you. Aval Kopanim Hui Maisi Yom Kippurim Ha'amor Al Seder. But nonetheless, at the end of the day, what is it? It's a musaf, essentially a musaf, right? But there's a maisa of it's a maisa Yom Kippurim Amar Al Seder. Omela the gam beikar chovaso yeshbo gam mishum chovas avodas hayom nosaf al chovas musaf shabo. So it is a korban musaf, and added to it, in addition to that, is this idea of a chiyuv of avodas Yom Kippurim. Yeah. So he says, okay, so what is it again? It's essentially a korban musaf. It is a musaf, like all other musafin. Every chag has its own musaf, but yet for some reason there's this idea that the avodas Yom Kippurim is built off of it. Okay? Varei Rambam, okay, and we see this in the Rambam. He was makdim betchilas halacha the ikar hamitzvahu sheyaseh maise Yom Kippurim kulo al haseder kemoshe kasu parsha acharemos hakarbonos the habiduyin v'shiluach hasair ushar vodos akam lashono. So what does the Rambam say? I mean, he's bringing this in for a reason. What does the Rambam say in right in the beginning of avodas Yom Kippurim? What does he say?
The ikar mitzvah is avodas Yom.
Right, so but he's saying, but what is the mitzvah? There's a mitzvah of what? What's the mitzvah to do? Look at the Rambam's lashon. Do all these things based on what?
Right,
kiseder. Okay. In other words, you have to do everything beseder. All right. There's an idea of the seder hayom. Okay. Kamosha kasu parsha achrimos, like it says in achrimos. All right. But with sefer mitzvahs, mitzvah memtes hosif od v'zelashono. What does he say in Sefer Mitzvos? He says, "He shetzivanu lasos avodas hayom." Okay, so the mitzvah is to do what? To do the avod of the day. Kolomar klal hakarbanos v'haviduyim hamisukanim biyom tzom Kippur. Okay, so what you have to do all the karbanos and all the viduyim, right, that were fixed for this day of Yom Kippur. Kidei sheyichupar behem kol avonos. Okay, how? What was the purpose of them? Through this avoda. What was the purpose of this avoda? To do what? To the avoda of what? Of kapara. So hold on. A question? Oh, so let me just finish. So what is the essential idea of the avodas Yom Kippurim? What's it for? Kapara. Don't even think about asking philosophy right now. That's what its halachic function is. It's kapara. Okay. This is the next hint to what his svara is. Okay. Kamosha shabab kasuv v'achuka b'chlala haksuva b'achremos. Right, and that is right the law that's included in what's written achremos. So if you go to achremos in that parsha, what is achremos telling you? The seder hayom of avodas Yom Kippurim, which is the avoda of kapara. There's no other avoda that exists that's purely for kapara. So he says, "V'rayas heyos haklal kulo mitzvah achas amram v'so perach chamishi b'kippurim kol ma'isa Yom Kippurim amar al seder hiktem ma'isa chler lo saklom." So the Rambam goes as far as to say is that there's a mitzvah to do. What is the mitzvah of avodas Yom Kippurim? Right. That is. In other words, you would think that there's a mitzvah to do step A and another mitzvah to do step B and another mitzvah. No, the mitzvah is
one mitzvah.
It's one mitzvah.
So if you don't do an order, you're.
It's one mitzvah. It's one mitzvah. One mitzvah. The avoda is one mitzvah. Okay. Why is he emphasizing that? You still have a question?
Yeah.
He says, let's just finish him, and then we'll start thinking out loud how to answer this problem.
Wait, what's the answer to my question?
Just wait. So he says, so you quote Sefer Mitzvos, right? Right? Hik demai sechler lo saklum akna. Ve'im came in Mela the kol shehu michlal seder avoda hamur of achremos harihu nichlav mitzvah zu. So therefore, anything that's listed in Parshas Achremos, anything that's listed in that parsha, which is the seder avodas hayom, anything listed in there is by definition part of the mitzvah of seder avodas hayom kippurim. Okay. Ve'hein hein divrei Rambam the kashiv gam la'ayal ha'am yeser al chovos hamusaf. So that's what the Rambam means by saying that the ayal ha'am is yeser al korban musaf. because it's part of that mitzvah of the day. Kevan de chovaso gamedin chovas avodas yom hamura al ma'isa kol avoda al seder. Right? Why? Because you see, it's clear in Achrei Mos. There's a chiyuv that comes from avodas yom to do this korban. Ella dehu atzmo ha'ayil ha'amar b'musafin. But that ayil that's noted in Achrei Mos, that's no different than the ayil that's in the korban musaf. And now we explain very nicely the words of the Rambam, Gam Lefi Girsa Shalano, even according to our Girsa. Okay, so if you had to sum up the Griz, so I was telling you before, if you sum up the Griz, what is so disturbing about the Griz? What's disturbing about the Griz is that he basically answers the question with the question. His question was, one second, his question was what? His question was, what is it? It's listed in A and B. So what's his answer? AB. It's an AB. What kind of answer is that? How could that be an adequate answer? You should never be. I mean, if you read this, you should not be satisfied with such an answer. You have to say, what's the point he's trying to drive across? To me, the right question, the first question I would ask in this, which is what I asked in this, is very simple. Okay, the Griz makes such a powerful, passionate, beautiful argument, showing us that the Ayil Ha'am, I'm supposed to react to that, right?
No.
Are you in pain?
No.
Oh, so. All right, so what's the first question you should ask on this? The first question is like this, okay? The Griz makes such a passionate argument. He says you have to understand this Ayil Ha'am is a korban musaf, but it's part of the Seder Yom. Why is it part of the Seder Yom? Because it's an Achrei Mos. Okay, but what question would you ask on that? The question I would ask is very simple. Other than the fact that it's listed in Achrei Mos, all right, is there anything about this korban musaf that tells you that it's special? Anything at all? Think about what he's saying. Think about what he's saying.
Can you have anything on the...
I'll take what you're saying and strengthen it. One second. But we have... We'll go back to the original Rambam. There's a list of korbanos that are korbanos musafim. The Ayil Ha'am is part of that list. It's not just the Ayil Ha'am that's a musaf. There are other korbanos. But those other korbanos are not part of the Avodas Yom. Only this one.
The abstract Avodas Yom?
There's two. So one second. There's two Avodas. Okay, when I say Avodas Yom, what I mean is the Yom Kippur Avodah. Okay, so all the korbanos musaf are not listed in an Achrei Mos.
But isn't fine.
They're not part of the mitzvah of the Seder Hayom Avodos Yom Kippur.
It really is, but those things.
The important question to ask at first is my nafkamina. In other words, he makes such a passionate argument about Ayil Ha'am, but other than the fact that it's listed in, let's say you didn't. Let's say you're an alien and come to this planet for the first time, and putting aside, and somehow in your brain was plugged in that korbanos are rational. So now you go ahead and you see this Avodas Yom Kippurim ceremony. Okay, so it'd be pretty easy to see which things are unique to Yom Kippur. For example, anytime the Kohen's wearing something white versus Big Day Zav, right? And let's say you knew what korbanos musaf were. What do you see in Ayil Ha'am whatsoever that tells you it's part of the Avodas Yom, other than the fact it's listed in Achrei Mos? Nothing.
It doesn't matter.
It looks like a korban musaf. It functions like one. It's just like all its friends.
But it doesn't matter because it's listed.
So what's the So what's he trying to get? What point is he trying to get across? So what Johnny's saying something very good, except for the only problem with what Johnny's saying is that like, let's say you have A to Z, he's like at X, right? But you haven't developed how you get to X. He's right. Ultimately, the answer is going to have to be that somehow the Ayil Ha'am is bridging the two, right? That you're right. There's something about it. There is something about it that what the Griz is trying to drive at is that in its formulation, the Ayil Ha'am somehow is bridging these two worlds. But why is that important? Not philosophically, why? Halachically, what's going on here?
So,
Working off what Johnny said, let's just make it a little more precise, okay? What kind of day requires a korban musaf?
Any day with
A chag. Okay, what is it? Okay, so
Chag,
let's be a little more halachic here. Okay, if it's a chag, there's a certain idea that exists in the chag.
Bliss.
Well, it's true, but let's call it kedusha siyam. Okay, it's the idea of kedusha siyam, sanctity of the day. If a day is sanctified,
you can't say kiddush on Yom Kippur, so this is.
No! Don't stop! Don't try to cheat ahead. 1 second. So every chag requires a musaf. Why? Including Shabbos, because it's kedusha siyam.
What is kedusha siyam?
Isra malacha. That's a perfect example of kedusha siyam. In other words, the fact a day that you can't do malacha on that day is sanctified. It's a unique day. Forget which question.
So this
no question about what kind of mode it is.
In addition of malacha.
What a korban musaf does is a musaf is an indicator. Obviously, musaf. It's an indicator that this day is different than other days. Okay, now every chag has to have a korban musaf because of its kedusha siyam. Is Yom Kippur any different? No. So it requires a musaf. But what else exists on Yom Kippur that doesn't exist on any other day?
The Avodas
Yom Kippur. And what kind of avoda is that? Avodas kapara. Okay, but so now, think about it. Just now you can start sensing where the problem is. Okay. Well, yeah.
Is that it?
I'm just
I saw a part.
no, I'm just setting one side. I'm going to set one side of the problem. You've got one side. You haven't got the other side yet.
What do you mean the other side?
You'll see what I mean. Okay, it's like this. In other words, the problem is that there's also an idea in Yom Kippur that the nature of the Yom, that the kedushas of Yom, that what emerges from it is the Avodas Yom Kippurim, the Avodas Kapara. But now, is it possible to say that this day is really comprised of two kedushas? It's absurd.
What do you mean?
You can't. Okay, you have a problem here.
The Kippur process is
Two system of korbanos
Right.
that exist on Yom Kippur.
Yeah.
One is Musaf, which every chag has because of Kedushas Yom, but there's another system that emerged called Avodas Yom Kippurim that in and of itself has nothing to do with the core Musaf, but stems from what? The Kedushas Yom. Right? So now, so what would you think? You would think that what? You would think this day has what? Two. That can't be.
Why?
Because you can never have a day that's
I
good.
see about that.
You're right. So one solution would be one emerging from the other. But one second. You have a problem though. What would emerge from what?
Right. So
But the Griz goes out of his way. I told you that line is key. He says what? He says the avoda he wasn't just talking about the ayil am. He's saying there's an idea that there's there's the idea of musaf and that the idea of kapara emerged from it. Because if it were separate, what would you have? You'd have two separate kedushas yom. That can't be. So you have to have one emerge from the other.
Right. So
right? So the kapara.
I'll tell you why.
One side of the problem with ayil am is that I shouldn't say that. One theoretical problem that exists is that you can't have a day that has two kedushas yoms. That's impossible. It's absurd. It has to be one kedushas yom because there have to be 2 different days. 1 second.
Sorry.
On the other end, okay, what would you think? Right, you would think that okay, well, how do you solve the problem? Okay, so what does the avodas Yom Kippurim emerge from? The seder of korbanos emerges from what? Musaf, right? But there'll be a problem.
What that means, but
It means like this. It means that you have imagine it's like, I'll give you a perfect example, okay? Take that idea of Yantiv, okay? The nature of the Kedushas Yom of Yantiv, okay? The Rav has a famous piece on this in his shiurim from his yard side. So the idea of Yantiv, what is Yantiv, right? Is Yantiv its own unique concept, or did God take the idea of Shabbos as a blueprint
and dilute it?
And then, well, I won't say dilute it, but then Yantiv emerged from Shabbos. What's Yantiv? Yantiv is Shabbos minus certain malachas, plus Simcha. He didn't create a new concept. Shabbos is the blueprint. And what's the raya for that? Anyone? $64,000 question. What's the raya for that?
It's malacha.
No. What's the raya for that from the Torah?
Light the candle.
The proof of this idea comes from Parak Chaf Gimel Pasuk Aleph in Vayikra. Vaydaber Hashem Shalei Mor Daber b'nei Yisrael v'marta lahem moadei Hashem asher tikru osam mikra'ei kodesh elahem moadai. Okay, so what's a moed? Holidays, right? The holidays. Are you going to leave for this part? Okay, this is good. The holidays, okay. What are the holidays? Sheshes yomim taseh te'aseh malacha of yom hashvi Shabbat Shabbason mikra kodesh kam lacha lo sasu. 1 second. What's the first moed? Shabbos. But how could Shabbos be a moed? So again, just to clarify, the other end of the spectrum, the other end of the problem, okay, this is how you approach the Griz here. One side is that you can't have two kedushas hayoms on one day. On the other end of the spectrum,
Can't be a simple emerge.
the other end of the spectrum would be is that if you go ahead and say that the Avodas Yom Kippurim emerges, the Seder emerges from Musaf, then there's no Musaf anymore. The Musaf of Yom Kippur would be the Avodas Yom Kippurim. That can't be it. But that can't be either.
There's Musaf here.
No, but I want to make sure you understand the other side of this. The other side saying that the other logical possibility is to say that there's the Seder Yom comes from Musaf, but then there is no Musaf. It's just a day of Kapara. There's no reality of Musaf anymore. It's just a Yom Kapara. Be only one. It would eclipse the Korban Musaf.
Yeah,
It would not exist anymore. So what's the answer? So on one end of the spectrum, we know it can't be that there's two Kedushas Yoms in a day. A day can only have one identity. Now, let's think about it.
What did I initially say?
I don't remember.
No,
So
it was like one of
Dumbass.
yeah. Now let's go to the other end. Okay. Now, what is if you look at guys? If you look at Yom Kippur, okay. If you look at Yom Kippur, what's Yom Kippur? If you had to identify the Seder of Yom Kippur, what would you identify it as? Kapara, right? Oh, so the other way to formulate it was to say that what happened? You have a system of Musaf, and Hakadosh Baruch Hu came along and developed, so to speak, the Seder Avodas Yom Kippurim of Kapara from the Musaf. If that were the case, what would be the problem with that?
The
What would cease to exist?
dissolution of Musaf.
Right, there'd be no Musaf.
I use a nice word.
There's an idea that the Ayal Am is telling you. That what is Yom Kippur?
It maintains
Right.
most.
Let me just get this clear, okay?
That sounded like
So what the Griz is saying is,
semantic.
what the Griz is saying is that the solution, the only solution that can exist is that you need to. What is Yom Kippur? Yom Kippur is a day of one Kedushas Hayom with 2 tracks of Avoda. And therefore, because of 2 tracks of Avoda, there had to be one Korban that teaches that idea. And that's the Ayal Am. The Ayal Am tells you that what's Yom Kippur? It's one Kedushas Hayom, but it tolerates the existence of 2 tracks of Avoda.
And there's no
where do you see that in? You see the Ayal Am. Because Ayal Am is both. It's a Korban Musaf,
We would
right?
need 2 tracks of Avodah.
There's one point. Just be clear about it. In other words, by saying that this day is one Kedushas Hayom, because you can't have 2, there'd be 2 different days then, right? So 2 tracks. That's why the Griz is so passionate in reading the Rambam the way he is. Because look at the Rambam's lashon. Why does the Rambam say it's brilliant? Now the Rambam says this. One second. Let me get the actual quote. He says, "The Od Makrivin Yeser al Musav Zeh." Okay, Parbin Bakar Lachatas Munisra Ba'ayil Ola. Ba'ayil Haba Mishel Tzibor. Okay, the ayil from the Tzibor. Right, Ha'amor the Parshas Acharimos. Right, Vehu Ha'ayil Ha'amor B'Chol Moshe B'Kunim B'Chol Musaf. What is he really saying with that? What's he saying?
It's one and the same.
It's the unifier. It's the korban that takes these 2 tracks and tells you, by the way, this is one day that allows for 2 tracks to emerge. But if the Ayil Am can tolerate this dual identity, it's not a dual identity of 2 kedusha. It's saying
We
that
know all this just from like one line.
one vav.
Oh,